Welcome back to the show. In this episode, I'm going to share with you the 9 key parts of the work I do that are the key things we need to do to change our lives. So having written 2 books that in total came to nearly 1,000 written pages and 18 hours of audio, people often ask me to sum up what I think are the key things we need to do to change our lives. Now, my first answer to that is usually to point out that constantly trying to find shortcuts is a surefire way to never transform your life. Transformation takes hard work and dedication, which is why most people don't do it. So after some time actually thinking about the question properly though, I've managed to boil everything I've learned into 9 areas that I'm currently calling the 9 key pillars of transformation. And that's probably just to test out whether it's a good name for another book. I often joke with coaching clients that I refer to loads of parts of the work I've learned and shared over the years as my favorite part. So I'll constantly say, no, this is my favorite part. It's a bit like trying to pick which of your children is your favorite. We know we're not meant to say which one it is, but we all know there is one. So having done that for a while, I thought about which bits I'm talking about when I say that. And it's basically the following list. So it's taking radical responsibility, it's multiple personality work, shadow work, the stories we tell ourselves, understanding, accepting and processing our emotions, physical stuff, so sleep, exercise and nutrition. Number 7 is figuring out what you really want and going for it. Number 8 is being kind to yourself. And number 9 is rinse and repeat to infinity. So my favorite analogy for this is it's like the original Karate Kid movie for those who are old enough to remember it. If you do each of the things on the above list separately, you might feel like you're painting fences, washing cars and scrubbing floors when you wanted to be learning karate. But the reality is when you get to the end of doing them all, you'll realize you're a black belt killer with a little innocent face. And everything other than point 6 and some of point 7 in the list are covered in depth in my last book, which is How to Solve Any Problem in Life, The Root Causes of Everything. And you'll see how everything I talk about pretty much links back to one or more of those topics. If you want to get free chapters of that book, you can get them through the link below this episode. The rest of this episode is a short summary of what I mean by each topic and why they're the keys to helping you transform your life. If you're new to my work, it's also important to know that everything ties back to the same philosophy, which is that all of our problems come back to us having low self-worth and not feeling good enough. So each of the things in the list is a way of building our self-worth. If you'd like to watch or listen to old YouTube and podcast episodes that go into more detail on each one, I'll mention where you can do that. And there are links and episode numbers underneath this episode in the show notes. And you can just search for The Paul Cope Show on your favorite podcast app to search for the podcast number. If you watch the YouTube videos, you'll get to go back in time and see how the channel has developed since I first started recording in my apartment during COVID lockdowns. It's also funny going back and watching how many times I actually start an episode by saying, this is my favorite. So let's start at the very beginning, which is number 1, taking radical responsibility. Now, in my view, this is the foundation of any work we do to change our lives, no matter what you're doing. I used to talk it simply as taking responsibility, but I've realized over the years that the radical bit is crucial. So I've found that most people who want to change their lives are prepared to take responsibility, but only for about 90% of their lives. There tend to be a few key things that we all want to carry on blaming someone else, something or someone else for. Now, the counterintuitive thing is that the more we take radical responsibility for everything, so bring everything back to ourselves and ask what we could do differently, the more freedom and certainty we have in life and the more control we have, which is what we need. Episode 4 of this show goes into more detail. As I say, the links are below in the notes. Number 2 on the list is multiple personality work. Where do I even start with this? So I developed my thinking on this work by bringing together ideas from all different places. I by no means invented this, but I did add a few twists of my own. The basic idea is that we've mainly been taught our whole lives that there's just one of us, which is just bullshit. We've been developing multiple parts of ourselves since we were born to ensure we survive and to meet our needs. Now, by getting to know each personality or character that we've created subconsciously throughout our lives, we can finally learn how to control the damaging things that have been happening for years. If you look for episode 25, you'll get a much more in-depth explanation. That is a very long topic to go into. Number 3 on the list is shadow work. Now, this might actually be my favorite child. If you lived with me, you would probably hear me reference shadow work when talking about other people once every 47 minutes. I absolutely fucking love it. And if I was forced at gunpoint to pick one thing that everyone should do to change their life, it would probably be this. So shadow work originates with the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And in very basic terms, it's all about how we've repressed parts of ourselves since we were little kids. And now those repressed parts lurk in our shadow, only to be revealed when we see them reflected back at us when looking at other people. So in short, everything we hate about the world is just something buried deep inside us that we don't like. So by focusing on our own darkness and bringing it into the light, we can stop the outside world impacting on us in any way, which leads to peace and contentment. Sound good, right? So episode 33 has more detail on this. Again, links below. Number 4 on the list of the 9 key things are the stories we tell ourselves. And straight away, this is why I end up saying every part of this work is my favorite bit, because I've just said it's shadow work, but I'm already thinking maybe this one or multiple personality work if I'm forced at gunpoint. But this all comes back to when I first started learning about neuro-linguistic programming, known as NLP, and qualifying as a practitioner many years ago. Ultimately, nothing in our life is real. Everything we have is just a series of stories that we tell ourselves. So once we get past the shock of that revelation, we can realize it's an unbelievable gift, actually, because no matter what happens in the outside world, it's our interpretation and the story we tell ourselves about it that determines the quality of our lives and how we experience it. One person thinks that getting a puncture in their car tire is shit and it ruins their day. Another person thanks the universe because forcing them to pull over might have saved them from being in a car crash 10 minutes later. Again, there's loads in this. Go to episode 31 of the show to get more explanation. Number 5 on the list is understanding, accepting, and processing our emotions. This ties into and underpins the other emotional and psychological part of the work, and it's huge. The sad truth for most of us is that since we were little kids, we were taught to suppress and repress many of our natural emotions. I realized at 38 years old that I couldn't even properly talk about my emotions in any meaningful way. And I found myself having to look them up in order to start my education about them from scratch, which is something I get loads of people to do. The good news, though, is that by learning all about our emotions now, how they're all perfectly normal and healthy, and how to accept and process them, we can begin to solve much more complicated problems in our lives that were built on emotional repression. Episode 29 goes into way more detail on this one. Number 6 is physical stuff, sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And this is the main thing from the list of the 9 key topics that's not really covered in my books, although I do talk about healing from chronic illnesses at the end of the last book. But if we want to transform our lives fully, the physical aspects are really big. They're huge. I'm no expert on any of them, which is probably why I haven't written about them before, but I have spent years delving into each one, and now I'm focusing more on them because I've done so much work on the psychological and emotional side of life. Now it's time to get into the physical. So if we nail our sleep, our exercise, and our nutrition, loads of other parts of life just become easier by default. So I'd highly recommend spending some time and energy looking into what works best for you in these areas. Number 7 on the list is to figure out what you really want in life and to go for it. Now, I probably don't talk about the second part of this enough, although I talk about the first part constantly. For us to fully transform our lives, it's not enough for us to just deal with all of the problems we've accumulated over the years and get rid of the shit. It's also crucial for us to figure out what we actually want to spend our lives doing and start moving towards that life a little bit every day, because it's the forward momentum towards something that we love that gives us the incentive to keep going through the challenging times of transformation. That's crucial. As I say, there's not as much of that in the book, but we need to delve into it as well. Number 8 on the list is being kind to yourself, another huge one. And I cover this with taking responsibility in the last book, but I've left it until here in this list because it applies to everything that's gone before. In my experience, too much of the personal development and self-help worlds lead to us beating ourselves up for not doing the things they tell us we should be doing. So given that the entirety of my work is built on the premise that our problems all go back to us not feeling good enough and having low self-worth, Beating ourselves up just adds to the problem and keeps us stuck. It's crucial then that we're as kind to ourselves as we can be while doing all of the work. Episode 47 covers this more in a short video. And last but not least, number 9, rinse and repeat to infinity. Doing any of this work takes dedication and commitment, but doing this last bit takes more dedication and commitment than anything. If you want to do this work and change your life, it's crucial that you treat it like physical training. Imagine going to work with a personal trainer for 6 months and getting really fit and then stopping training altogether. What do you think would happen? You'd lose all the fitness you'd gained. And sadly, I see this happening time and time again with people who've made loads of progress by focusing on this work for a period of time. They reach a point where, for whatever reason, they decide to stop and things start falling apart. It's happened to me and it's extremely common, so there's no judgment. At the same time, it's important to note that doing this work is something we do for the rest of our lives, like keeping physically fit. It's the same way that exercise is something we incorporate into our existence if we want to remain physically fit and healthy. The good news is often the bulk of the work is front-loaded, as it is with physical fitness training. It takes more work to get fit in the first place than it does to maintain it. The key is to forever consider ourselves as students rather than seeking to become masters, because the student mindset helps us to stay focused and humble rather than expecting ourselves to have nailed it and not need to do any more work. So that's it. If you just do those 9 things for the rest of your life, everything will be great. And to finish on one of my favorite lines that I repeat to infinity, it's simple, not easy. In the same way that making money and getting fit are simple, but if they were easy, we'd all be billionaires with 6-packs. The universe puts hurdles in the way of the best things in life to preserve how special they are. So all I can tell you after years of continuously doing this work is that despite the lows you'll inevitably have to face along the way, it's absolutely worth it. Just take one step at a time and go into it knowing it's a long-term project and everything will work out. I'll see you next time.